Hey, welcome to Bluejay Banter, sponsored by Infusion Brewing Company and West Pacific Dental Group. I'm Tim Kruger, along with Ross Ferrarini, our producer, Zach Weaver. Kind of a retro edition. We're back to last year. We're not in the Let It Fly studio just for this one show, as we got some stuff going on. So we're doing it each from our remote locations. How you doing, Ross?
I'm good. I'm good. Just got a little Big East hoops on here in the background.
Yeah. Speaking of Big East hoops, you're going to love. Make sure you stick around to the end of the show. We got a long interview with John Fanta, which I did earlier today, and you'll love a lot of stuff we talked. We talked a lot of Big East hoops. We actually talked a lot about this Xavier team, and he had a lot of thoughts about Creighton, a lot of thoughts about their fans after that loss the other day too. So you'll want to hear that. On the show, we're going to kind of briefly get Ross's thoughts on the Colorado State game, and then kind of flush that maybe. We do want to revisit Shoot Your Shot. We got a couple updates there. I want to tell everybody about our prediction segment. And then we're going to dive into the volleyball regional that'll be here in Omaha on Friday and Saturday. Creighton Blue Jays, the number 3 seed overall. So that's very, very nice seeding for the Jays, one of the top 12 seeds in the country. They're going to take on Colgate at 6:30 on Friday. So we'll talk a little about that. Then I've got a brief, because of all the noise concerning the Colorado State game, I've got a little breakdown that I want to share with you here a little bit later on between Stephen Ashworth and Ryan Nemhart, and compared to their first 6 games this year and last year. And like I said, then we'll get to the Fanta interview later on, and also end up on a preview of Oklahoma State, a brief one of that. So we're sponsored by West Pacific Dental Group and Infusion Brewing Company, as I said. And wow, Dr. Robert Hogan is wonderful staff over at West Pacific Dental Group. They're my dentist. They're now Zach's dentist as well. This is great. It spreads, right? They're committed to providing you and your loved ones with the utmost personal and excellent care. Located in Omaha, over in Pacific region, they believe their patients deserve the best care, and they make an effort to make sure you always feel welcome and at ease. So give them a call today, 402 697 0765. Dr. Robert Hogan, huge Jays fan and Jays supporter. And you'll be glad you did, because their holistic view of your dental health is tremendous. And it really, really, really they look at what's best for you and get your feedback on it. So check them out today. West Pacific Dental Group, 402 697 0765. Ross, I'm dying to hear what you thought of this Colorado State game.
I don't have anything groundbreaking, probably outside of what everybody else has said about it or had commentary about it. I mean, I don't think the world's falling. I don't think I would be stunned, and I mean absolutely stunned, if we shot that poorly in any game the rest of the season. Um, Certainly between Trey and Baylor, they just seemed like there was a lid on the rim. Now, you give credit to Colorado State. That's a good team. They had a lot of injuries last year. Nico Medved's done a really nice job there with that program. They've had a lot of injuries last year, so they took maybe a step back last year as far as record-wise, but they've got a lot of guys back and added a couple players, and I was really impressed with them, quite frankly. And it's no fun to lose like that, obviously, but again, I'd be hard pressed if this Creighton team is gonna shoot like that for the rest of the year. So it's kind of one of those throwaways, throw it away, throw away the tape, and get back to work, because there's 2 huge games coming up this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, a lot of things in that game that they need to work on to get better
Sure.
at. And it just isn't one player like a lot of the fan base wants to blame it on. I mean, there's everybody, everybody is to blame.
Wait,
I
who
thought
is
Trey,
who is the fan base blaming it on?
they're just picking on Steven for some reason. They're just making the comparison to him and Nemhard, and just, oh my God, he's so small. They're exactly the same size. He's just not as quick as Nemhard. No, he's not. A lot better shooter than Nemhard. Go look at the stats, and like, I'm going to break those down later. But I mean, it's just you know how fans are. They're the fan reaction to this game very similar to that Dr. Pepper commercial where they're burning their gear, and the
Yeah,
guy
yeah,
goes,
yeah. I know which one.
Bosworth
Yeah.
goes, Oh, that was just the first play. I mean,
Yeah.
very similar, really.
I mean,
But
really,
yeah,
what it didn't, people can, talk about Ashworth and Nemhard all they want. I mean, that's not even remotely what came down to the Colorado State game. I mean, you've got literally one of the best guards in the country in Trey Alexander going 1 for 16. And then his counterpart, Baylor Shireman, also one of the probably the better wings in the country. What did Baylor was Baylor like 3 for
4 of 17 or something like that.
something like
Yeah,
that? I mean, that's the game right there. Those guys go 4 or 5 for
you're not going to
33.
overcome that.
You're not going to overcome that. It has nothing to do with Stephen
No.
Ashworth and Ryan Nemhard. Like,
Could we have played better on the defensive end? Yeah, it did. As Max said in his post game, it looked like when Kalkbrenner came up and Ashworth was trying to go, it looked like there was a disconnect there. Like they kind of both went halfway, which not
mm-hmm.
going to work. That's something they'll work on and so forth. And hey, let's do something not talked about. Mason Miller wasn't available for us either.
Right.
I mean, so that's you can say all you want about that, but that's a big deal. Okay,
Yeah.
so
No, Jason Green's
um,
getting his first minutes ever at the college level.
yeah,
Um, I think Jason can bring some really nice things in the long term. I think he definitely brings some size and athleticism, off the bench. But God, the kid, he's never played. He was a redshirt last year. He's never played at this high level before, so he's filling in. You're right. Mason's not playing. He's filling in for Mason. Isaac, people forget too. Isaac is just getting acclimated. Yeah, is Isaac the most athletic player on the planet? No, he's not. But he's a big body that really shoots it, and he's just getting acclimated. He redshirted last year. This is all brand new to him too. So,
yeah. And
um,
plus, both teams we played over those 2 days both went small at the four, so we kind of had to match them with Farabello, and
right, right,
so that was another thing. I mean, they just did a good job. That's not an excuse. That's on us that we have to do adjustments in the future, but so on and so forth. So at any rate, that game's over with. We're going to move on. And yeah, interesting. Was it Wednesday? I think Colorado State play. That'll be a good test because
that's a
Colorado's a
good
good team.
game. Those are
Yeah,
both good teams. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
So
going to
that'll
be a
be
fun
interesting
game
to
to
see how
watch.
Colorado State rolls through that with a double-digit win. Then we can say, well, currently I think Colorado State's 26 on Ken Palm right now. So hey, that loss isn't looking right now like it's hurting us too much.
No,
But a
I
big
mean
week.
I'll be stunned if that Colorado State team isn't in the one of the top couple of teams to finish in the Mountain West this year. I'd be
Sure.
stunned.
Yeah. And it's a big week for us. We go 2-0 this week, and that game will be in the rearview mirror pretty quickly.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
it's a big week for us because we lose one of these, and we lose to Alabama. Then all of a sudden we lost 3 non-conference games where a lot of us were projecting maybe one, maybe on the outside too. So, um, but at any rate, yeah, Oklahoma State coming in, they're 3-3. They've lost a couple of close games. To St. Bonaventure and Notre Dame. I think they're both 2-point games. One went to overtime, but Notre Dame's not very good. Okay.
Notre Dame is totally rebuilding. St. Bonaventure, I think, is a little bit better
Yeah,
this
they're
year.
okay. They're okay.
Abilene Christian, for the size of school they are, is always a
Very good program. Very
great,
good
great
program.
program.
Was not shocked that they won that game at all.
No, you called it, Tim. I give you credit.
Yeah.
I told you that about a week after, I think, or the next post game show. I said, good call on Abilene Christian. I think they were 10-point underdogs or something like that, and they end up winning outright. The big question is for this team is Bryce Thompson. He hasn't played the last 3 games. He is far and away Oklahoma State's best player. It's not even close. And it's currently says what I'm looking at, he's questionable for Thursday. So if he sits out, that's huge for Creighton going in there and facing this Oklahoma State team that already struggles to score, even with him in the lineup.
Yeah, it is. So 8 o'clock tip on ESPN2. We don't play very many ESPN games, that's for sure. So 8 o'clock tip on ESPN2. Ross and I and Josh Jones will be live down at Let It Fly right after the game for the post game. So join us for that. And we want to switch gears totally here and move on to the volleyball. We want to just cover the region there. But before we do, I want to mention Infusion Brewing Company, our sponsor, home of the Let It Fly brew. You can get Let It Flies at the games at CHI. You can get them at Let It Fly sports bar as well. When you walk in, there's always a big tub of Let It Flies there. So make sure you grab one of those. Two great locations, 6115 Maple Street and also 6217 South 118th, where where they brew the beer. They have a little tasting room there, so make sure you go down. They got some great options right now, vanilla bean. They also have like a lot of holiday options. I know they've got the s'mores flavors. They've also got a Christmas cookie vanilla bean, which is very interesting. So check all that out. That's Infusion Brewery. Volleyball. Wow. So they were picked one of the top after the committee seeded the teams. They were one of the top 12 seeds in the country. Got a home regional where they're going to face Colgate at 6:30. At 4 o'clock on Friday, the Utah State and Minnesota, which should be an outstanding match, will take place. Minnesota has always been one of those powers below Nebraska, Wisconsin, Penn State in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
So again, going to be Jays are going to have to play their best to get out of this region. Fortunately for the Jays, they're playing their best. Watch the match over the weekend where they just bulldozed St. John's. It was never close. Last set was close, but I mean, the match was never in doubt. And obviously, St. John's upset Marquette, so that hurt Marquette a little bit. But at any rate, I heard it's almost all sold out already. So fans really anxious to get behind the Jays and support them. It's really nice, a Friday night game and a Saturday. I was hoping they don't do the Friday Sunday thing, because then it would somewhat conflict with the Nebraska Creighton game. Although the Jays women, speaking of the Jays women, play a game at 1 o'clock at Sokol, so there's no way they could have played then. So at any rate, I don't think they'll have any problem with Colgate, but it'll be the next match that could be a real challenge. So the Jays get out of there. They're in the Pittsburgh region. So if Pittsburgh were to win their first regional, everybody would go to Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh's been kind of a perennial power now, getting a 1 or 2 seed here the last few years in volleyball. So, but anyway, everybody get out and support the Jays. If you can scarf up a ticket somewhere, great. I spoke about the Creighton women. They just got back from Cancun. What an effort down there. They won the Cancun Challenge. They beat Georgia Tech and Michigan State. Lauren Jensen, with a fabulous weekend, was named Big East Player of the Week. 32 points against Michigan State. And so they kind of got over that. You know, we talked our last show about them playing Green Bay and how that was going to be a tough game. Well, it turned out to be a very tough game as Green Bay beat Creighton, but the Jays bounced back. And they take on Northern Iowa Sunday, 1 o'clock at Sokol. So you can watch that game and then go over to Let It Fly and catch the Jays Huskers at 3. So make a day of it downtown Creighton campus and just north of there, or south of there, excuse me.
32 points is a lot of points at the college level. Especially, in the women's game. The women, some main differences. The women's game, they tend to play more team basketball in the women's game. There's not near as much one-on-one as there probably is in the men's game. And so for her to go out and score 32 points, I had to imagine, and especially like in Flan's offense too. I mean, Flan's not just, letting, Flan teaches them to play the right way. They're setting a lot of screens. They're cutting off the ball. I had to imagine, without looking at the box score, that was a pretty darn efficient 32 points from her.
Yeah. So at any rate, they have a lot of weapons, that team. Yeah. And so it's going to be great watching them throughout the season as they get into Big East, playing some really good teams in the Big East this year. I want to jump ahead to a thing we call Shoot Your Shot, where we make predictions and we update it. A lot of the things that we have can't be updated till the end of the year. But we do have we got one coming up. Matt DeMarinis did one for us that volleyball will make it to the Final Four. So we'll be able to tell if he's going to gain some points on that or not. I hit mine.
Which they would most likely play, who, in the Final Four.
Yeah, I know it. His is just that Creighton will get to the Final Four. Yeah. So, hey, there you go. I think Final Four is in Tampa this year too. Not a bad place to go. I had that the Jays would win the first 2 games by an average of 35 points. I know Zach tweeted out at me or texted me about, halftime of that North Dakota State game, like, oh, it was kind of a close game at half, but then the Jays blew it open, covered that easily. So I got another point for winning that. So I have 2 points now. Anyway, just wanted to update everybody on that. We'll get to more shoot your shots as the season goes along. I did clarify something about attendance because one of the shoot your shots is that we'll have one of the top 10 attendance games in history this year. And the Iowa game was a sellout, yet. So I was talking with Rob about, okay, what actually is a sellout? What's the attendance figure? And it's the 17,362. So apparently we didn't sell any standing room for that game. I don't know. I don't know how it all works. They have some sort of formula or something. But at any rate, even though that was a sellout and a great crowd, we didn't get close to any kind of top 10 record on that game at all. So we got a ways to go there. I want to briefly just, like I said, people were kind of on that. They're all over Ash. They got it. Last year, the whipping boy was Kaluma and Farabello, right? Everybody was all over them all season long, right? This year, they're all over Ashworth and whoever else they can find. But I thought, I think people are probably A, misremembering things a little bit, and B, things aren't probably as bad as they think, right? So I just broke down the first 6 games of last year versus the first 6 of this year. 6 this year, obviously, with Stephen Ashworth. Last year's first 6 with Nembhard, right? Now, let's be fair. I would say Texas Tech we played last year is probably equivalent to Iowa this year for us, somewhat, okay? Other than that, the only difference was we've got Arkansas in here. We're a very high-level opponent, okay? We're Creighton.
Oh, in Arizona.
Well, no, but that was the 7th game of the year, so it didn't count.
Oh.
Okay. Right. So, we play Colorado State, but, if you're going to measure, you'd have to say Arkansas is a higher level opponent than Colorado State was. But at any rate, so there's a little bit difference there. They both actually, in the first 60, averaged 28 minutes a game. Exactly. So that Ashworth has shot, and I think this is where people maybe don't look at the stat sheet. He's shot 45% from the field so far, 41% from 3, which is his average. Okay. So people are saying, wow, he's not hitting his threes. Oh, he's hitting 41%.
That's pretty, yeah, that's pretty darn good.
Okay. Conversely, Nembhard also shot 45% from the field in the first 6 games. He hit almost 41%. Okay. So you say, well, there you go. Well, but let's look season long. As I said, that was Stevens' average. Nembhard's average was 35.5. So over the course of the season, Steven was about a 6% better shooter from 3 than Nembhard was. So Nembhard had some really good games, especially in Maui. Assisted turnovers, both are very good. Ashworth, and I don't think people are giving him credit. Ashworth's at 21-9. Nembhard got off to a fabulous start. If you remember last year, he was 34-6. So off to a great start there. Again, he had 13 more assists, but if you want to play devil's advocate, they didn't have a 20% shooting night like the Jays just had. So when you have that kind of night, you're not going to get an assist if nobody's making a basket. It's that simple. People overlook that too. There were several times Ashworth did a great job of finding the open man for a 3, and they didn't hit it. Wow. It's a great pass, but he's not going to get an assist for it. This kind of surprised me. Ashworth actually had a few more rebounds per game. It was only 0.7, but it's a small sample size. But Nembhard always, to me, struck me as a guy for his size that got a lot of rebounds. Like he gobbled up a lot of the loose balls that bounced around and got credit for rebounds. So it kind of surprised me that Ashworth actually has more rebounds per game than Nembhard does. His average was assisted turnover was 3.5 to 1.5. Nembhard's was 4.75 to 2, very equal. So yes, you could say, and Nembhard scored, averaged 11 points a game during that stretch. He had two big games in Maui. Ashworth only 8. So you can definitely say that, okay, by those stats, Tim, you know, see, Nemhard did perform better the first 6 games, but it wasn't by a very wide margin. As you can see by the numbers, it was pretty close, actually. And the fact that that was Ryan's second year in the program versus Stevens' first. And again, that bad shooting night's going to throw off his assist stats. So I just tell everybody to settle down and please listen to John Fanta later on in our show. He says the exact same thing. I've said my piece. Ross, you want to add anything to that?
No, I kind of hit on it a little bit at the beginning of the show. I mean, yeah, they're different players. Like they're not just one for one. Everybody's kind of thinking that they're just a substitute for one another. And I guess in some sense they are that, and that it's starting point guard for starting point guard, but like they're different types of players. I think throughout the season, I would be stunned. Ryan shot, 35, we'll round it up, here,
25%.
0.356,
Yeah.
36% from 3 last year. Okay. I'd be stunned if Steven doesn't shoot higher than that this year.
Oh, he's going to. He's a career 41% shooter. So
right. So now is Steven's stature against some of these bigger guards that we're going to face in the Big East, is that a legitimate concern? I think that's a legitimate concern. Sure.
But it was a concern for Nemhard too, because
it was a concern for Nem. It was a concern.
These guys are the same size. Nemhard more athletic.
Correct. Yes, I think that's what helped Nemhard was he was more athletic. Right. I wanted to touch on it. I always laugh. Kaluma was the whipping boy last year amongst the fan base. Farabello, I guess, a little bit too. Arthur Kaluma averaged 2 offensive rebounds a game last year, and he was tremendous defensively. I loved his tenacity. I loved his willingness to be physical on that end of the floor. I understand Arthur, he certainly had his drawbacks offensively. He was a little bit of a ball stopper. He didn't shoot the 3-ball great. But I thought Arthur brought a lot of really good things to the table. I'd love to have Arthur on this year's team, tell you that much.
Yeah, and he wasn't, I guess what I saw too is his defensive performances weren't consistent. You know what I mean? Like there was games where he didn't perform very well on the defensive end. So I'd like to see him be more, but yes, when he played, yes. And when he would go get the ball, I think that was the problem too. Some people thought he probably didn't garner enough rebounds for them because they saw when he did play his best rebounding, he was really effective.
Mm-hmm.
But I mentioned this to somebody the other day. Steps every game. He's getting a little bit. I thought he played, as badly as we played against Colorado. I thought he was okay out there. I mean, and I thought he was okay in that first game. He didn't get a lot of minutes, obviously, because of the way Loyola played. But he's gaining more confidence out there. Is what I really.
No, like. I agree. I think Isaac's going to end up being a big contributor to this team. Hopefully by the end of Big East play, he certainly lacks some athleticism. I think at that spot, but he is, you can see it. He's a big kid and he can really, really, really shoot it. I would imagine, he's got the type of game. I think there's going to be a couple of games where, things aren't going so great. And he's the type of shooter that he might really bail us out with a couple of threes. So, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing him progress the rest of the year.
Okay, as I said, we want to thank Infusion Brewery Company and West Pacific Dental Group as our sponsors. And as I said, we're going to close out this part of the show with my 20-minute interview with John Fanta. So you want to stick around and hear that. We'll next be joining you, as we said, for the post game on Thursday night at about 10:15, right after the Oklahoma State Creighton game. And we'll be back here next Monday. We'll be live at Let It Fly for Bluejay Banter, where we break down the Nebraska game some more. And I'll look ahead to what's coming up with Central Michigan and Alabama and Vegas down the pipe. So make sure and join us then. We want to thank our sponsors. Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Ross. But we will see you Thursday night. And now enjoy the interview with John Fanta. He is terrific. Hey, it's great to have with us once again from Fox Sports, John Fanta. Mr. Fanta, how are you?
Tim Kruger, I'm doing fantastic. I hope you're doing well out in the Omaha area as well. It's always lovely talking college basketball with you.
Well, it's great. And by the way, congratulations on your nuptials. Your wife seems lovely, and I hope everything's going great.
God bless my wife. My wife, Victoria, she has to put up with my behind all year. That's not easy, Tim. Somebody
Good point.
somebody tweeted at me last week and said, "Is your wife tired of basketball? If she was tired of basketball, we'd have some real problems on our hands. She's only tired of me." No, things are good. They're going great. God bless her. And I always say to people, say, "How's everything going?" And I'm like, "Well, we're 9 weeks in. It's a long season. There's lots of ways I could screw this up." No, one day, one week at a time. God bless. The folks who work in this field. Tim, you work in it. The other people know it. You got to have a supportive spouse,
You
and
do.
I
You
really
do.
do. I really do.
I'm good as long as the Hallmark Channel keeps on the air. You know. Hey,
Yeah.
let's talk big picture. We'll work our way down. So you released your top 25. I thought it was pretty good. Kind of some ways at the top is going to mirror my bracket that comes out next Monday. But I can't remember a time like usually even this one after we had some results. If you do a top 25, there's a lot of projection still in it because the season's so new. I can't remember a year when you could throw out all the projections, you'd still have the same number one team because when you play the schedule that Purdue's played and what they've done, it's a no brainer.
No brainer. They are the unanimous number one team in the country, are the Boilers. And, you think about it, they actually they became number one. They entered the top five, I should say. They entered the top five of the AP poll a year ago on this Monday off the PK 85 when they won that, when they beat Duke and I think beat Gonzaga. That was an amazing run by them. And then they were in the top five. And for the last year, Purdue has been a top five team in college basketball. Even during the summer, if you put together a top 25, they were going to be in it. Mm-hmm. 2 years ago was when they first got to number one. And their sports info director, Chris Foreman, tweeted this afternoon, like, I remember 2 years ago when we became the number one team in the country and we thought, this is unbelievable. What a historic moment for the school. And he goes, now you open your laptop, you see we're number one. And we're like, well, that's awesome. But that's been the way it's been the last year. In other words, I think that there's a portion of our country, of college basketball fans, that are only ever going to think about what happened against Fairleigh Dickinson until something differently happens. But I would encourage that portion of people, not that I got no tie to Purdue. I don't get tied to Purdue, contrary to what some of the listeners and fans of yours say that maybe I have direct ties to a point that I'm getting checks, from Big East schools to say nice things about them. I assure you, I don't get crap. I wish my bank account was helped by that. I don't get that. And I certainly don't get help from Purdue. I'm just telling you how, to me, we diminish the regular season product if all we ever do is talk about what happened on one night in March. Yep. Purdue is having a generational era of greatness right now. And you know what's refreshing about it, Tim? Is that the era of greatness that we're watching from Zach Edey and Purdue isn't coming from a Duke or a North Carolina or a Kentucky or a Kansas. It's coming from West Lafayette, Indiana. That should be embraced and it should be enjoyed. Let's relish in watching Zach Edey play college basketball. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah. And to those people, I also say, do you not remember recent history? A Virginia team lost in the first round, then the next year went on to go all the way. So, I mean, hey, let's let this thing play out. Let's see what happens. I can't see anything like that happening in Purdue. Yeah, let's just put it that way. Boy, I'm sorry. I think I may have Marquette number 2 overall, despite the one loss. I mean, they played just the toughest schedule as Purdue, and they looked every bit the part.
Yeah, they do. And I think with Marquette, what stands out to me is that they shot 5 for 17 from three against Purdue. In the previous game against Kansas, Tyler Kolek only made 3 shots. He shot 3 of 9 and turned the ball over 4 times. And Marquette beat Kansas handily. Like, it wasn't close. They controlled and dictated the way the game was played. And that's because Cam Jones and Sean Jones really emerged, I thought, last week for Marquette. But more than anything, Tim, the reason why Marquette's better than I even expected is because Oso Ighodaro has become one of the best bigs in America.
Yeah.
His ability to hit those baby hooks on the interior, you can see them right now in your eyes after watching them play last week. Those are hard shots, Tim Kruger. Like, there's a lot of bigs who take that shot. It's short. Always is short. Like, you see somebody go up, you see a big man go up, and you're like, ooh, that's awkward. Ighodaro makes it look seamless. He's got terrific feel. The mobile five works really well in Shaka Smart's system. And for those who don't know, when Smart took over the Marquette job, he was really conscious about his staff and kind of how he made those hires and who he brought in. And I'll tell you what, assistant coach Nevada Smith is a jewel on this staff. In that, Smith is a guy who he was part of Texas' staff for 1 year, but he's got a ton of G League experience. He spent 5 years in the G League. And for the hardcore hoops junkies, there's a lot of G League coaches who have gone on to become NBA head coaches in the last 10, 15 years. You know why? They roll up their sleeves and work. They work on coaching their teams. Because in the G League, as much as a player's developing in the G League, coaches are developing. And I thought that in talking with Shaka and in talking with the Marquette people, Nevada Smith, there's something you can only find out on this show. That assistant coach for Marquette, he has helped design their offense and helped really make their Marquette plays. While a lot of people are zigging, Marquette zags. And they use their bigs with such a mobile NBA-like approach. And it's really hard for teams to defend, as Kansas and Purdue and UCLA learned last week.
It surprised me a little bit because I thought, how much of an effect is it going to be? Because Prosper meant so much and could do so many things. And they haven't missed a beat so far.
They have not missed a beat, and they're deeper. You know, that's
yes.
I think that they are a deeper team with just a combine of Sean Jones with Chase Ross. David Joblin's gotten better. We thought that would happen. Ben Gold helps them. If Gold starts to hit some threes, like, whoa. But they are an outstanding team. And if you said to me right now that you thought, I don't know, like, I still don't think they'll win the Big East, I'd say I respect the take because there's other teams that are capable of winning it. This will be at the top of the league, at the top of the Big East. I really believe this. I think it's going to be as wild of a regular season title race that we've seen in college basketball in general in quite some time. Quite some time.
Yeah, I think though, and I think you'll 100% agree with this. Purdue, those teams they just played, they know Marquette's a good team, right? Once they get into the Big East, they're going to have a big red target on their back. Everybody's going to be aiming for them. It's not going to be like last year when it was maybe Villanova and UConn, but it's going to be Marquette.
But you know this because you do the bracketology. 10 days into the season, 10 days into the season, I'm getting told on my Field of 68 podcast, the Big East is down. It's not what we thought it was. It's just not at the level that we thought it was at. It's not good enough. The middle's a question. Now, I'll say this. The middle's still a question. Like, do we know exactly how good Xavier, St. John's, Butler are? I will say Butler's better than I thought.
Yes.
I've watched a little bit of them here, and they're better than I thought.
Xavier, too.
But so, like, to your point, Tim, that top four, when you now factor in Villanova,
right?
Because that top four is so strong, if the middle just stays afloat and beats and gets 1 or 2 wins against that top four, you do the bracketology, the strength of a win over the top teams in the league, that's going to determine if the Big East is getting 5, 6, 7 teams into the NCAA tournament.
Right, exactly. And I think a team, I don't know about St. John's yet, but I think Providence is very good. I love the pieces they have back. I think Xavier's shocking me, really, because I thought, oh, man, losing the 2 guys they lost, how can you go forward. And yet they've looked pretty good. And Butler surprised me. So yeah, I think there's some depth there.
Yep.
Well, we talked a little bit about off air about the Jays, and people are lining up on the pedestrian bridge by the CHI, ready to jump off already. One loss. Reminds me of the Dr. Pepper commercial. They're burning their fan gear, and it was the first play of the year. Epically poor shooting night. I mean, you look at the list. I forget who put it out, but I mean, it's one of the top 5 worst shooting nights in the Greg McDermott era.
Yeah. Which then tells you that that's not going to happen again this season. And if it does, and you predict it, you can tell us the winning lottery numbers. Seriously, folks, take a breath. Take a breath. Try to take my advice here. Do not overreact to one game. I know it's easy to do so. But Creighton shot as poorly as they ever will. I mean, just to see Trey Alexander and Baylor Shireman go 5 for 33 in a game combined is nutty. It's just purely nuts. 6 of 29 from 3. I mean, Trey Alexander to me could be an NBA draft lottery pick. He could end up being that good. If he's not, he's a first rounder. Like, he's one of the elite shot makers in college basketball. Sometimes shot making doesn't fall your way. That's the whole point. It's why it's a hard skill. On Thanksgiving, it just so happened that nothing went right. It was a really bad performance. And you credit Colorado State. It's not like they lost a bye game. They lost on a neutral floor to a good Colorado State team that will make the NCAA tournament this year. Now, this win will help. And maybe I'll be wrong about Isaiah Stevens in Colorado State, but I'd like to think that they are a good team and that they're going to hover around the top 35 of the country and that we're going to see them in the NCAA tournament. But for Creighton, being around them in the preseason, they were run like a professional operation. The players have expectations. The expectation is to win a championship. The players in the culture of that building are way too strong for anybody to get overly concerned. Because here's why that is. The best reason. Last year, any other team in America, if not 90%, would have faded and fizzled out when you lose 6 in a row. This team loses one game, and you got people that think that this season's going to go in a tailspin. You child, please. It is not going to be like that. They will respond. Now, will they beat Nebraska? They'll beat Oklahoma State. I mean, Oklahoma State, I don't think very highly of. I think Creighton will bounce back. I expect them to bounce back. Will they beat Nebraska? We'll see. Nebraska's good. I think Nebraska's going to end up making the NCAA tournament this year. And the game is in Lincoln. Hard game. Now, revenge will be on the minds of Creighton. But overall, do not overreact. Do not overreact. And the thoughts on Stephen Ashworth, that he can't get it done, that he's not the point guard, he's a big boy. He's 23 years old. He'll be just fine. Greg McDermott's too good of a coach to let that day define him. The Jays will respond from this. I'll be stunned if they don't. They're going to bounce back.
I think it'll be just fine. Yeah, when you look at Ashworth's number, I was looking at him today compared to, say, Ryan Nembhard, who, had been in the program a while last year. Sure, Ryan had more assists and maybe a little more scoring in those first 6 games, but everything else is pretty favorable, really. I mean, so there really wasn't that much difference. So it was a team loss, just as its team wins,
Yes, and it's not like here's the other thing. What makes fans the angriest about this game, and I can see it, okay, because I'm a sports fan myself. You get really ticked off when your team gets blown out and everything went wrong. But then it takes a beat, so you're allowed to be mad. I'm not going to tell you how you should feel, but I would say this. I would rather have everything go wrong and everything be bad on the same day, and you flush it.
Yep.
And then a good amount of things went pretty well, and you still lost to Colorado State. That would be cause for more concern, because it would tell me maybe Creighton isn't what I thought they would be this year as a team. Like when they played well, they still weren't good enough to beat a Colorado State team. Did I misjudge them? No, they had a bad day. When this team plays to their capabilities, they are one of the 10 best teams in the country. They'll get back to that.
And Greg's really good about flushing too. He's had to deal with this in his career, and he's very good about let's move on. Now, this is a big week, as you mentioned, with at Oklahoma State and then at Nebraska, 2 true road games, their first 2 true road games of the year. But yeah, I know the fans will be up for that game Sunday. That's for sure. Especially after last year. So, and then we roll right. Well, Creighton has Alabama, and then we roll right into
only Alabama.
Yeah, and what a great start for the Creighton season with Villanova and Marquette. 2 games right off the get go. The other thing about Creighton too, I think people are, when you look at the schedule after last Thursday, they only play like 5 games in 35 days. That's a nice stretch because Greg likes to, he often complains when you get in the season, we don't have time to work on us. We're right on to the next game. He goes, he loves that day or two, and that's what he just did over the weekend, was took some time to work on Creighton. And so they're going to be able to do that during this stretch, and I think that's going to be a huge benefit.
December is the most underrated month of the entire season in regards to a team evolving. Because people don't understand that the last 2 weeks of December, I'll say this to people, to those who follow the sport, December is truly a good time of year for us because it allows us to catch our breath before basically 3 months and change of nonstop coverage. Mm-hmm. It is a gap time. It is a gap time. It's a time where if there's something wrong with your team, you can attempt to answer that question. And that's why, Tim, as you well know, it is a long and winding road to March. It is a long and winding road. So the moment that you think my team is done, I'm going to tell you right now, with the exception of a few, very few seasons are, quote, done. It's November 27th. Take a breather, reload, and understand that you're exactly right, Tim Kruger. Finals week is actually a good thing for these coaches. It allows them to really, those players cannot wait to play basketball after those tests. And guess what? They're probably not playing somebody else. They're playing against each other again in practice. It's a very good time of year for a coach to answer a new question about his team.
Yep. Who, good or bad, who would you say has surprised you the most in the Big East so far?
Well, Xavier has surprised me for the good. Butler has surprised me for the good. St. John's has surprised me for the not good. I'm not going to sit here and say bad because I don't think that they've been awful. They got shellacked by Michigan. They got shellacked. I mean, they just got run off the floor. They were not ready for the game. I thought that Rick Pitino got outcoached and that he got outmanned. I thought his team was not prepared and looked overwhelmed and totally just got buried. But they came back in Charleston and they ended up taking 2 of 3 games. They beat North Texas, who's capable, not great. They fought Dayton. They didn't play 40 minutes. They were better than Dayton for about 20, but they didn't hang on. They beat Utah. Utah is a
good win.
Good team. Like a good enough win. Utah is 45 in KenPom right now. And St. John's just out-athleted them and beat them. And Tim, they had a week. You know when you just said it. You just brought up such a great point. When they came off Charleston, I'm looking at their schedule. I'm like, they have a whole week before their next game. And then they have another whole week before their following game. Do you think that they're just twiddling their thumbs inside Rick Pitino's practice center? No. They beat Holy Cross, who, by the way, beat Georgetown. They beat Holy Cross by 46. They defended. Now they're going to play at West Virginia on Friday. That game is huge for St. John's because West Virginia not looking too shabby here out of the gates. They're shorthanded, but they don't look very good. That's a very important game for St. John's. Why have Xavier and Butler surprised me? Because with Xavier, Tim, I didn't know what front court they would have.
Yeah.
Seriously, we thought this team is so depleted by injuries. How are they going to be able to function? But Desmond Claude's made a huge leap. Quincy Olivari's coming off a very nice performance. They got a tough Oakland team tonight. As we're doing this interview tonight, that's an interesting game. But you know what? Lazar Djokovic, the freshman, I really like him. Gitas Nemiksha has done his part. He's done enough. And I really like the freshmen, Dalen Swain and Trey Green. Xavier's the upside team in the league. Butler's better because, first off, they couldn't be any worse than what they were last year. They were a horrible offensive team last year. But, Tim, their offense is better. And Pierre Brooks, the Michigan State transfer, and Jameel Telfort, the Northeastern transfer, Van Mata's got some chess pieces on the wings that he can play with. And, that's kind of reminding us earlier that this notion that Butler stinks now and is done and buried, he still has a sense of pride. And I spent time with him for 2 days as they were practicing. And I got to tell you, I sensed good energy. I thought the team was playing together, and I thought his teaching, I just thought he was coming through better to his guys. I don't know if he needed a year to recalibrate. I still don't know if they'll make the NCAA tournament, Tim. I'm not saying they're an NCAA tournament team, but there's not nothing with Thad Matta. The guy didn't totally lose how to coach. He had to get some better personnel, and now they have that.
Yep. John, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you got a big dinner date tonight, so let's get ready for that, John. That's what's important, right?
Big dinner date, Tim. I'll never pass up on a big dinner.
All right. Thanks, John. We'll catch up here in a couple months, and when the season gets rolling, we'll get some more Big East results, and we can hash those out.
Skol!
Oh, thanks, buddy.